Hello everyone, in honor of Terminator Dark Fate, I thought I would share with you my personal favorite Terminator films, going from my least favorite to most favorite. Now, I know Terminator Rise of the Machines all the way to Genisys no longer count. These timelines can be confusing, but there truly is no fate but what we make for ourselves. Before I continue with the ranking, this is going to be a controversial list. Again, this is my personal opinion, so I don't want any disrespect, but this list may piss off some people, to say the least. This isn't a ranking of what I consider the best, but more so the films I enjoy the most, my favorites. So, starting at number 6 is Terminator Dark Fate. I know, this is actually a well-crafted film. As far as like the craft of the film and how well made it is, I would actually put it up there with Salvation and under the first two. Nothing's gonna beat the first two films, but to me, this was a very generic rehash of the first two films, and it really negates everything that happened in the first two films. And I know there's an alternate timeline and that John fulfilled his destiny, but it just like really they sent another Terminator at a different time years later. Just the way the execution was at the beginning really left a bad taste in my mouth. But it wasn't really that. This film has a lot of criticism. I think that it's unjust. I don't think people would care if Denny Ramos wasn't Mexican. If she was like some white girl in Los Angeles, I don't think people would have minded, because the things this film gets criticized for are what other films and reboots get praised for, such as Star Wars The Force Awakens. And that's what they did here. They brought carbon copies of our original characters for a new generation, and then brought back the original characters to get us into the movie theater seats, and they basically put them in a supporting role. That being said, there's a lot to like in this. I love Linda Hamilton back as Sarah Connor. She still kicks ass and takes names. And with John dead, that brings a new element to her character. It was her job to protect John Connor, and the future is averted, but she lost everything. I also like what they did with Arnold as a T-800. He did fulfill his programming. What do you do? Well, he's a learning computer, so he starts to basically gain empathy and learn how to be human. And I found that very fascinating. They could have just made a whole movie with that almost. Then we have Denny Ramos, played by Natalia Reyes. I think she does a great job in this. I just wish they spend more character development. This movie moves really fast. You don't have that build-up that you did in the original Terminator, but I guess also in the original Terminator, there was no security cameras and internet everywhere. He had to look for Sarah Connor through the phone book. So that's something different. And going on that, I love the Protector with the augmented human. Mackenzie Davis does a great job as Grace. I like her as an actress, but the character gets a little annoying to me at times. She's very aggressive towards Sarah Connor for no reason at all. I do like the friction of their different futures with Skynet versus Legion, but it's just like, you're unnecessarily aggressive. Don't you know who you're talking to? That's Sarah Connor. Have some respect. I also like Gabriel Luna as the Rev 9. He's pretty much, it's kind of like the TX, a male version of the TX, but if he could split himself. So it's like T800 and T1000. And it's liquid metal that's black instead of silver. So that's something very different. I like the fights there. I like how he can switch accents and stuff in different regions, and he uses that as an infiltration. And then him hacking into like the devices using drones. That's something very different and new. That's a fresh take on it. But overall, Dark Fate feels like a film that just, it just disregards Rise of the Machines through Genisys, but it's a film that feels like it just recycles old ideas we've seen before and done better the first time around. And that's how I ultimately felt. The action was a little bit weird. I love the airplane fight. Everything with the action set pieces are well done, but it's just too CG heavy for my taste. I wish there was more practicality, like the first two films of the Sarah Connor Chronicles. It felt clunky. If you watch Genisys and Salvation, and even Rise of the Machines with the T800, the T850 versus the TX, those fights felt more fluid. There was more like practical effects. I don't know if they're working around Arnold's age or that they're just on a green screen. Something about it didn't feel as good as it should have been. And I do like the beginning with the Pescadero Hospital footage. It's just no cool opening sequence. Like I would have had the road from T2 and then start there or something. I like the future stuff at the beginning. I also like the future stuff with Legion. That was very crazy. You could just have a future war movie, whether it's Legion or Skynet. I really love that stuff. How you're learning through things from Grace's flashbacks, the homages they had. And I ultimately like how Arnold looked underneath of the endoskeleton. It felt very much more like the first two. And there's some comedy in this, but there's one thing I have to say. It's my least favorite, but one thing I have to say that makes it better than some of the other ones on this list. The tone feels serious and feels grounded like the first two. Not as brutal, not as dark, but it's more in line with the Cameron films, and I can respect it for that. Do I want to see any more from this? No, they should just say hasta la vista, baby. Despite its moments, it just feels very derivative and not as creative as its predecessors. Next at number 5 is Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. Now, I don't know, this movie disappointed me as well when it first came out. I was 12 years old, but I don't know if I have stronger feelings because of the nostalgia of there finally being a Terminator 3. I grew up with the first two on VHS. I don't know, but I do like this better than Dark Fate. Dark Fate's a better made film, has a better tone. This is almost like a parody. But there's just something with the narrative that's just written better with the act structure, even if it is too similar to Judgment Day, you know. But we have Nick Stout as John Connor, Claire Danes. I like her as Catherine Brewster, that whole twist. But what I like is that they postpone Judgment Day. Nothing changes. It's further into the future, so that's very interesting. It's very interesting how they bring him back. I felt like it was more authentic and made more sense of how Skynet came to be and how, like, Judgment Day was postponed than the last one of just a Terminator coming back out of nowhere. Like, this one, it happens, but, like, there's a reason for it. They explain everything. But the TX, she's pretty much like the T-800 with, like, the liquid metal of the T-1000. She's not as threatening as a villain, but she does remind me a lot of Arnold from T-1. You know, she has that kind of level of dread there. The comedy is over the top and really kills it, but the second half of the film is really, really good. I think one thing that really hurts this film is the aged CGI. It hasn't aged well, but what I do love is that Stan Winston was still alive, and the way the designs of the hunter killers, the endoskeletons, everything looks, there is still that level of craftsmanship that was in the first two, but it kind of moved forward into the digital age. And Jonathan Mostow does a serviceable job. He did another film called Surrogates that wasn't too bad. And I like what they did. It was a ballsy ending with Judgment Day happening. This film ultimately felt like it was barely going somewhere, and then it just ended, and it really disappointed me. It's not as good as the first two at all. It's kind of like Jurassic Park 3 of the franchise, or like, I guess you could say Bound Forever as far as tone, where it has a little bit of elements from the first two, but it's just a bit more comedic, a bit more watered down. That being said, it was cool seeing the Terminatrix control other machines, have a female Terminator. Marco Beltrami's score was very well done. Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, I think, is finally getting some more love, but it's still not among my favorite Terminator films, as enjoyable as it is. After that, at number 4, this is going to make a lot of people mad, but I personally enjoyed Genisys a lot. That movie put a smile on my face, and it is a convoluted movie. It did try to start a trilogy. Terminator Genisys is a film that tried to have its cake and eat it too, you know? It's one of those films that just puts so much where if they just isolated one idea, whether it be the future before T1, whether it be like an alternate 1980s, or even like a 2017, they all would have been perfect for one film. Like, they could have split the 3 acts of Terminator Genisys and made them their own film for a trilogy. They really could have. Some elements remind me a bit of the Sarah Connor Chronicles, but what this tried to do is it tried to do what Star Trek did with, like, it being a reboot / alternate timeline where the other ones aren't exactly affected. This is just a nexus in time, so to speak. I think what really hurt this film was a miscast. Jai Courtney, he surprises me, but he's no Michael Biehn, he's no Anton Yelchin. It would have been cool to see John Connor be played by Christian Bale. They gave away that twist in the trailer. Something very interesting with Skynet. I do like how they have like a main brain of Skynet individual, or like a certain, it's a hive mind, like a queen bee, kind of like the Borg, you know? And I think Arnold gives a great performance here as Pops, and I also like the action, especially when you compare it to Dark Fate. Like, holy shit, the fight scenes are amazing, like with him in the T-3000. Emilia Clarke, she does an okay job. She's a younger Sarah Connor. She's short, so they don't make her seem as tall and intimidating as Sarah Connor. I don't know. Emily Blunt was considered, and they could have got her, but what bothered me is like, let's get somebody from Game of Thrones. And I'm like, you got somebody from Game of Thrones to play Sarah, but you didn't get the one actress who's actually played Sarah Connor before? I'm just saying. Anyway, it was cool seeing like older Arnold versus younger Arnold, even though it was short-lived. And I do love the beginning. The beginning of this movie is almost worth it alone. However, they just do too much. There's a lot of jokes, and it just becomes confusing, and they just say to hell with it with the timeline. But I do like the ending of it. It is a solid kind of like alternate solo outing. And I love that part with the helicopter chase, and he's just like, I'll be back. And he freaking kamikaze skydives into a damn helicopter, man, with the music. That was just awesome. And I also like that fight too, where he's just like, "You're nothing but a relic from a deleted timeline." I just love that. Genesis, while it may not be the best film, it's a guilty pleasure for me that I just enjoy. It's just a bunch of fan service moments. After that, at number 3 is Terminator Salvation. Terminator Salvation, I think, is the best made sequel. And it's one of those that I know is supposed to be a start of a new trilogy, but it didn't try to negate everything that came before. It actually involved Judgment Day happening in 2003. We get to see Marcus Wright on death row get executed before Judgment Day in that year. But also, there's certain homages to the first two Guns N' Roses song, T1 with like the tunnel scene and stuff, and also Kyle Reese being prisoner. Like it matches up stuff from the first two a lot. And then there's also the part of the nuclear power source, the nuclear core with the Terminators, and that was something that was mentioned in T3. So, like, it didn't exactly ignore T3. It, like, continued it, and that's what they should have done. However, was it the future we wanted? No, it wasn't exactly that grim future yet, but it was before that. And ultimately, I really liked the direction of this, but it was maybe perhaps too different than what was shown in the Cameron films. It felt more like Mad Max with machines. I love Christian Bale as John Connor. Win or lose, this war ends tonight. And he's like, if we stay the course, we're dead. We're all dead. And I recommend watching the director's cut. Mick G surprised me with this, and it had a cool opening logo of Danny Elfman's music. I'm like, yeah, that's a Terminator film. At the time, I enjoyed the Arnold cameo, but it looks very, very bad now. That CG did not age well. It didn't look real back then, but it really, really looks bad now. But I like the character of Marcus Wright, Another thing they gave away in the trailer is that he's machine, but if you didn't know that, it's a cool twist. You follow this character. He meets Kyle Reese and Anton Yelchin. Rest in peace, man. The late Anton Yelchin, he did a fantastic job as Kyle Reese. He sounded just like Michael Biehn. Like, I could see him being Michael Biehn's Kyle Reese, and that was just awesome. And how everything was set up. I also like how they had Catherine Brewster there, as played by Bryce Dallas Howard this time. The reference to Sarah and the voice recorder. This just ultimately had a lot more moments of homage to the previous ones, while also doing something different. It wasn't about time travel. It was about the future war and John Connor and everything there. And that was something different. I have to respect that. I loved this film when it came out. And even though I enjoy certain moments of the other movies, this one overall as a film I think is well made. And I think people took it for granted. I think people are finally appreciating how well made this movie is now after Genisys and Dark Fate. And it's just severely underrated. And I think the best one after the second. Next on my list at number 2 is The Terminator. The original film is amazing. There's no arguing. The first two Terminators are the best. It's James Cameron. He's the brainchild behind this. But what I love about this film is that Arnold Schwarzenegger is a force to be reckoned with. He cannot be bargained with. He cannot be reasoned with. And he will not stop ever until you are dead. He is unstoppable, and I love him as a villain. I kind of regret that they didn't use him as a villain, even like in T3 when he got like corrupted by the TX. It's a shame we never got to see him as a full-fledged villain. We got to it a little bit in some parts with like CG cameos, but never like throughout a whole movie. And I love how this one has a human versus a machine. The other ones have machines against machines, and yeah, there always is one that makes the other obsolete, but there's something more terrifying about a human being fighting a machine. I love Michael Biehn's performance, and I love Sarah Connor, Linda Hamilton in this. She's not a badass yet. This is like her being the final girl, really. This is a science fiction horror film, and for a low-budget independent film, it's amazing with Fantasy 2's effects. I love the score by Brad Fiedel. Oh man, the Police Escape score is good. And then I also love Burning in the Third Degree and Photoplay at the Club. Hey, that guy didn't pay me. It's like, you got me burning. That's the whole sequence was awesome at the Tech Noir. The police station scene's like, I'll be back. But I loved it. It's a good isolated movie that didn't really need a sequel. Left it open for it, but it was a good standalone story with a beginning, middle, and an end. And it's amazing what they did with such a low budget, and it's still more effective than the later movies. And it's sad that James Cameron films are much older, and they look better than the new ones. And that's because he filmed everything he could for real. He either used animatronics or CGI later for stuff he could have filmed for real. And I love it. That part with the eyeball always terrified me as a kid. It's gross. I'm like, ow, ow, ow. But I love Arnold there, him using the gargoyles, sunglasses, and then it's just like, hey, you have a dead cat in there or something? He's like, fuck you, asshole. That final fight is great. Just when you think it's dead, it comes back, and then Sarah Connor's like, you terminated, fucker. But what I love the most is like the future visions, and also like you find out the photo at the end is a photo that Kyle Reese was looking at in his memories. That was cool. Man, the Terminator is a science fiction classic, and it's the reason why we have this franchise. But shouldn't have been a franchise. No, not really. It was a complete story. And I think for Terminator to move forward, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a low budget sequel, whether it's a reboot 10 years down the line, they need to go back to its horror science fiction roots, I believe. After that, at number one, is there no denying it? There's no fate but we make for ourselves, and it's Judgment Day. T2 Judgment Day is one of the greatest sequels ever made. It's up there with Godfather 2, The Dark Knight, and The Empire Strikes Back. Like, that is like the epitome of a movie sequel that not only levels up to the first, but surpasses it in every single way. Story-wise, visual effects-wise, this was a groundbreaking film. And I love the reveal of Arnold being the good guy. Like, you didn't think that. That whole hallway scene's there. Robert Patrick is amazing as a T-1000. The effects there still look better than any T-1000, Rev 9 TX, or whatever other effects than any other movie. Linda Hamilton is damaged after the first one, and she's a total badass in this. And who could forget Edward Furlong, who I consider the one and only John Connor. Easy money. I love the setup of this. This sets up the Guardian, the Protector, John by himself, the freaking tanker chase, the practical action effects. Oh my God, there's so many moments that are just fucking awesome in Terminator 2. I cannot stress enough. Ultimately, it gets down to a deeper story of like what defines humanity, you know? Can you change fate? Is everything predestined? And that's one thing that always aggravated me about the sequels is that it's like Judgment Day was inevitable. I'm like, no, there is no fate but we make for ourselves. And that's what I love about this with free will. I love the humor with John Connor and Arnold Schwarzenegger. That scene in the special edition is great where they try to destroy the chip. And then John's like telling his mom, how am I supposed to be a great military leader when my own mom won't even listen to me? And that was a great scene there. Not only showing Sarah's experiences from the first film, but John Connor already kind of showing levels of leadership for the future. And I just love everything. The Tinker Chase and that score is one of my favorites. Cyberdyne, Joe Morton as Dyson. I don't know why I remember that part. Yeah, the nuclear scenes were so haunting, and this film was not for the faint of heart. This film had edge. It was dark, it was brutal, and I just love this movie. This is the ending for Terminator. Like, I love it. And it leaves it open with the road, you know. The future is uncertain, unknown. And it's a shame that they did not create a better fate for these films. That being said, I love the alternate ending with the older Sarah. It mirrors the first film and would have been a solid conclusion, showing John as a leader, being a senator with a daughter and stuff. But yeah, T2 is my personal favorite. I watched that film over and over. And it's just a shame they made sequels because that ending was emotional with Arnold self-sacrificing himself, and it's just for nothing. And that's a bummer. But there's no fate but we make for ourselves, and if you choose to end it here, be a good ending. Anyway, those are my favorite Terminator films. Going from my least favorite to most favorite personally. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what are your personal least favorite to most favorite films out of the Terminator franchise. Feel free to let me know. You can also check out these other videos on my channel that are Terminator related. And pretty soon I'm going to have a video going over some of the stuff with Dark Fate and how to fix the Terminator films, the timeline, what I would have done in the movies, but also what I would do moving forward now. Feel free to be on the lookout for that. You can follow me on the Stardust app at Fred Film Fanatic. Like, comment, subscribe. Till next time, everyone. Hasta la vista, baby.